Chiaroscuro. This is an Italian term for an artistic technique that emerged during the Renaissance period. It involves the use of strong contrasts between light and dark in order to give images a more lifelike, three-dimensional effect. If the term were directly translated from Italian to English, it would literally mean light-dark. Nowadays, though, this technique is probably best known by its French translation. Just as Renaissance painters used the philosophy of Clair Obscur to give their paintings contrast and depth, the video game that popularized the term, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, weaves this into every aspect of its design. But this dualistic principle is not limited to the extreme opposites of light and dark. It's beauty and ruin, dream and waking, creation and destruction, trauma and lighthearted silliness. Yet beneath all of them runs a deeper tension, that being a love for what came before and a longing to move beyond it. Now, anybody who has played Expedition 33 could have picked up on this regarding its story, but I think it's just as important not only in respect to gameplay, but what the game represents to gamers and developers. That tension between reverence and reinvention defines how the game plays. Anybody who has ever played a Japanese role-playing game, or a Japanese game in general, will instantly recognize elements from other franchises. Some elements that the developers of Clair Obscur have admitted to themselves. The parry system was inspired by Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. The Picto system is an echo of the equipment ability systems from Final Fantasy IX and Lost Odyssey. The combat system is clearly inspired by the more recent entries in the Persona franchise. Yet with these and other gameplay mechanics, they never feel purely derivative. They're never glossed up by the developers as a tribute to obscure a lack of originality. They're tributes, and they feel wholly original at the same time. This balance is what reminded me and so many others why they fell in love with video games in the first place. And honestly, it's something the rest of the gaming industry could stand to remember. A game doesn't need a budget of hundreds of millions of dollars with thousands of coders to be successful or competitive, nor does one need to rely on cheap remasters and remakes in order to stay relevant. Expedition 33 is proof of that. It was made by 30 people who understood the architecture of great game design and what made it timeless, and then they used that as the foundation to build something new. In an age where so much of the industry seems to have forgotten that this basic principle is what made the medium magical in the first place, Expedition 33 feels less like nostalgia and more like a reminder. It's a wake-up call, not just to the industry, but to the medium itself. Though granted, 2025 was a year where it feels like these bad industry trends have started to turn around. The most celebrated games of this past year came from smaller studios: Hollow Knight Silksong, Hades 2, Blue Prince, and yet, Expedition 33 still feels untouchable in comparison. It's the one leading the charge, radiating hope for the future of gaming, and it deserves every single award it will get for this reason. Of course, knowing how to move forward isn't always clear, and is almost always painful. Just like the mechanics were inspired by these aforementioned games, Expedition 33 feels haunted by the philosophical questions those same games posed, and in many ways, never truly resolved. Whether it's free will versus determinism, like in Final Fantasy IX, or the right way to cope with grief, like in Lost Odyssey, Expedition 33 tackles all of them with unflinching honesty. Today, I want to examine the game's story through the lens of the Chiaroscuro philosophy, as well as how those prior games influenced it. Before I do, be warned that this video contains spoilers for every aspect of the game. And second, if you like the work I do here, please consider supporting me on Patreon or joining my YouTube membership section. I will leave links to both in the description box below. From its very first scene, Clair Obscur embodies its namesake. The game opens in Lumiere, a city that mirrors Paris. Though Paris is known as the City of Lights, this version feels carved from shadow, a place where beauty and decay share the same streets. The city appears to be in the middle of a celebratory festival, but the mood of the attendees seems more akin to a funeral. This is because of the gommage. Every year on the same day, a number is painted on a large monolith out at sea, which is done by the enigmatic demiurge known as the Paintress. The number that is painted is the age of person that will disappear from Lumiere. This year is 33, and so everybody that is 33 years old will fade away in a gust of dust and leaves. This number has been counting down from 100 for the past 67 years, and will continue to do so until there is nobody left alive. Not willing to accept this state of affairs, Lumiere has sent expeditions out to try and kill the Paintress every year following the Gamage, but despite their best efforts, each one has failed miserably. Though there are still people that keep the faith and try to bring joy, those moments are all tinged with the awareness that all things are fading. It's a perfect encapsulation of the dichotomous theme of Chiaroscuro. Here we have faith and futility, celebration and grief, human will and divine indifference. It also raises an impossible question. In a place where life itself is destined for erasure, is it incumbent on every human being to have children, to breed more soldiers, to fight against the Paintress's tyranny? Or would it be a greater mercy to not have children than to bring them into this nonsensical world? The courage of those who affirm life is certainly commendable, but if you're a team of 100 ants going up against an elephant's hoof, at what point does the Nietzschean will to power collapse into the blindly asserting will of Schopenhauer? Nonetheless, in keeping with the most common JRPGs, the hero seeks to exalt the will of mortals and defy a cruel fate imposed by a godlike figure. Unfortunately, when the expedition makes landfall, they are initially obliterated. The only person that seems to be left over is the main character Gustave. Heartbroken by the loss of his comrades, and surrounded by the corpses of past expeditions, he comes very close to giving into despair. Thankfully, at the last moment, his friend and research partner, Lune, arrives and not only gives him the appropriate level of love and concern, but reminds him of his duty and their unique opportunity. Both of them birthed a piece of technology called the Lumina Converter, which enables them to transmute a magical substance called chroma into items called pictos, which gives their wielders special offensive and defensive capabilities. If Gustave and Lune can push onward and regroup with the other survivors, they will have a chance to create an effective resistance. With these scenes, Gustave shows his humanity. He suffers immeasurable grief, but he has a chance to not only make a lasting difference for those who come after, but to make his life-affirming philosophy triumph. For the first act of the game, we regroup with the characters known as Ciel, as well as Gustave's sister figure, Maëlle. As they journey to the monolith, they frequently encounter the journals of past expeditions, each one detailing what their accomplishments were, or lack thereof. As I read these journals, I started to understand why the developers might have said they were inspired by Lost Odyssey. In that game, one can come across several short stories that also expand upon its key theme and blur the moral line. In both cases, they ask how one should live in the face of an unconscionable situation. With Expedition 33, it's how to live in the face of certain doom. And with Lost Odyssey, it's how to live when you're immortal. How to live when you are doomed to suffer the loss of loved ones over hundreds of years. How does one build up the strength necessary to contend with the random tragedy of life and not give in to resentment? The randomness in particular is made evident through the initial journals that the 33rd expedition comes across. The 53rd expedition struggled with whether or not to kill a member of their team, due to them having fallen into a coma following a battle. After all, she was only slowing them down and straining their already limited resources. So what was more important, saving her life or killing the Paintress? A member of the 52nd expedition died, due to what was supposed to be a friendly fight with a creature known as a Gestrel, and a member of the 66th expedition couldn't accomplish anything. Did each expedition deserve these ends? Was there anything that could have been done to avoid their fates? Anybody who pondered these questions for too long would give into madness. But luckily, we have men like Gustave to set the example. Though we build bonds with the entire expedition, sympathizing with their struggles and celebrating their victories, this is especially true with Gustave. He is encouraging to his team. He's able to keep a sense of humor amidst the tragedy. But most importantly, he's a formidable opponent in battle. He isn't a typical gaming protagonist with a destiny to fulfill. He crafts his own destiny through conviction. With every tragic event or scene he faces, he pushes forward, because he knows every act of resistance, no matter how small, matters. But though Gustave is a shining light amidst the dark chaos, even the brightest light cannot change the color of the canvas. Neither he nor the expedition are a match for the power of Renoir and the Paintress. Even if Gustave and the expedition made a difference, was it enough of a difference to save Lumiere? This is what makes Gustave's death hit so hard. He rose from the depths of despair and set a very positive example, but it still wasn't enough. At this point, the expedition asks themselves, how many more tragedies can they suffer before hope becomes cruelty? Though the expedition chooses to push on, both to honor their code and Gustave's death, the end goal subtly changes in reflection of this tragedy. Where Gustave fought for a better tomorrow, a new character, Verso, wishes to end the story entirely. Though he saves the rest of the expedition following Gustave's death and assists them in fighting the Paintress, his motivations have a much darker tinge. Verso is, somehow, immortal. He has witnessed every expedition since the first one fail miserably, and at this point, he has clearly grown tired. Though he suggests that he desires to kill the Paintress in order to remove his immortality, there is always an air about him that invokes distrust, that he envies death. At this point, however, we are unable to discern much and must contend with the immediate issue, which is how to move on and fight the Paintress. It is here that I believe the game pays the greatest homage. To defeat the Paintress, the expedition must forge a weapon that will break through the barrier that surrounds the monolith. To do this, they must take the hearts of two creatures known as Axons, and use them as the forging material. These Axons are known as Visage, or rather the Mask Keeper, and Sirène. I must note that the name Axon is a highly appropriate name. In neuroscience, axons are the cells responsible for transmitting signals through the brain. This is also true, by the way, for nevrons, which is the name given to the game's enemy NPCs. It is a misspelling of neuron, a nerve cell in the nervous system. By naming these creatures after parts of the brain, the game subtly suggests that our battles with them are taking place both internally and externally. But while axon as a scientific term merely describes a cell, Expedition 33 uses it to describe a more abstract concept. When I first encountered the Axon Visage and the Mask Keeper, I was already aware that the game was inspired by the Persona series, what with its combat system. But with the Axons, it became clear that its story drew from Persona as well. The Persona series takes its mythology directly from the psychological theories of Carl Jung. Even its title refers to his concept of the persona. He suggested that every human being puts forward a false, idealized version of themselves when they interact with others, in order to both hide and compensate for their faults. This mask is the persona. By engaging in a process of introspection, the need for a persona can be slowly eliminated, to the point where you can embody your ideal and have no need for a persona. With Expedition 33, this process is hinted at with all the Axons, but especially with Visage. After battling Visage, the true Axon controlling it, the Mask Keeper, is revealed. Then after a short battle with him, he asserts the belief that everybody needs masks in order to conceal their dark side. Then, in a key moment, Ciel easily removes the mask that the Mask Keeper forced on her, and says the following: "This mask can't hurt me, because it is me." While a mask, a persona, can safeguard our egos, clinging to them for too long can stagnate our growth, preventing us from realizing our full potential. It is also very significant that Ciel is the one who says this. As we learned from following her quest line, she suffered unconscionable loss when her husband died in an accident. Following this, she attempted self-termination by swimming out into the ocean and hoping that exhaustion would lead her to drown. Unbeknownst to her, she was saved by the character Esquier, an act that initially would seem fortunate until it is later revealed that she was pregnant during this attempt, and she lost the baby in the process. To choose to live on following these tragedies would require a substantial moral effort, to say the least. For Ciel to say that she no longer needs the mask, that she accepts who she is, what she has done, and that she is ready to move on, is a feat almost nobody can accomplish. It is both a moral and material victory, a chiaro that shines all the brighter against the blackest scuro. This does not comprise the entirety of Jung's theories of self-development, nor their inclusion in Expedition 33. The Axon Siren sings a song that embodies the soft comfort of unconsciousness, the respite from the tragedies of life that one can venture to in dreams, where all one's deepest wishes are fulfilled. This is why the characters see their loved ones that have long passed when they enter Siren's arena. To give into Siren's song and fall into eternal sleep would be a comforting end, but it wouldn't resolve anything. In some ways, it would make things worse, as we find out later when we understand who Siren represents. Just as the persona represents a sort of unconsciousness of one's faults, Siren represents unconsciousness in its entirety. And in both respects, they are things that need to be acknowledged, contended with, and moved past. As for the other two Axons, first there's the Hauler, the Axon that was already dead before the expedition arrives. I believe it represents the weight of conscience, the burden of what has been done and forgotten. Its lifelessness is symbolic of the rot behind the world of the game, and why there is such importance placed on confronting the unconscious. Finally, there is the Reacher Axon. Here, the character Mayel confronts a specter that has been haunting her for the entire game, a white-haired woman named Alicia, who looks frighteningly similar to her. She, like the other fading specters found throughout the game, are trying to make Mayel conscious of something. In this way, Alicia as a specter operates as a sort of Jungian shadow, an archetype familiar not only to fiction, but the Persona series and video games in general. By contending with the shadow, one can uncover truths about oneself that will lead to higher forms of psychological development. The end of this process is symbolized in multiple forms. With the aforementioned Ciel, it is when the mask and the wearer are the same. With art, as the character Renoir states, it is when art is both a mirror and a window for the artist. When one no longer has to confront the shadow, the unconscious and conscious sides of our mind are united in perfect harmony. It is the full realization of our true potential, which is what the Reacher represents. Thankfully, these journeys of self-realization enable the expedition to do what no other expedition could: defeat the demiurgic paintress, return home to Lumiere, and announce the good news. It's the kind of ending you would expect from a classic JRPG. The triumph of the mortal will over divine authority. Humanity can begin to forge their own destiny. But yet, there is one final shadow that had yet to step into the light. And then, without warning, everybody in Lumiere starts to gamage. Everything that the expedition had fought for, the trials, both internal and external, were all in vain, and the fault lies with Verso. It is revealed that the entire world of Lumiere and the continent was painted onto a magical canvas by Verso, but not the Verso we have come to know up until this point. That Verso is a copy of the real Verso, who died in a fire. His sister, Alicia, who was the basis for the character Mayel, survived this fire but lives in a debilitated state. Their mother, Aline, was so distraught by this incident that she fled into the world that Verso created and became the Paintress. Verso and Alicia's father, Renoir, saw what Aline's pursuit of unconsciousness was doing to her and her family. He sought to destroy the painting in order to liberate Aline so she could move on with her family. Unfortunately, the clashing of both of their wills did not result in immediate erasure, but a gradual one. This took the form of the gamage. But why did Verso's copy wish to have the world destroyed? It's because a remnant of the real Verso's soul was not only keeping the canvas alive, but rendering the copy of Verso immortal. It is here that Clair Obscur reopens a discussion that not only past JRPGs have had, but that has haunted storytellers for centuries. Would immortality be a gift or a curse? I would be shocked if Verso was not inspired by Lost Odyssey's lead character, Kaim. Both are immortal. They are men trapped between the Chiaroscuro of memory, and whether the ache yet occasional beauty of memory is preferable to the mercy of forgetting. Lost Odyssey provides only a quasi-answer to this problem. On the one hand, it succeeded more than any other piece of media in helping me contend with my fear of death. It helped me accept it as not only a natural but a necessary part of life. But on the other hand, it equally promotes life as the most precious gift, one that should be protected at all costs. Even if Kaim is sentenced to a life where he must watch thousands of his friends and loved ones pass away, to see war, famine, and disease ravage nations, he can still find meaning to sustain him by using his accumulated wisdom and good deeds to educate and inspire future generations. It must be noted, though, that Kaim's immortality differs in one key respect. Kaim literally could live forever. Thus, he had to ask himself what meaning could sustain him after 1,000 years of heartache. Verso, however, has reasonably surmised that his immortality is a curse without redemption. He is immortal in a world destined to die. So what sustaining meaning can there be when both meaning and time have a definite endpoint? Unlike almost any form of fiction that has tackled this question, though, Expedition 33 offers the player a chance to give a final word on what life and death really mean. Following the final gamage, the scene changes to the real world with the character Alicia. She is told by her sister, Clair, to venture into the canvas in order to destroy it, and bring both her mother and father back. Alicia agrees, and upon entering, she recovers her power as a paintress. She uses this newfound power to bring back her fellow expedition members, along with many others who died in the past, so they may help in expelling both her mother and father. Verso initially joins her, believing that they share a common goal, but what he doesn't realize until the end is that Alicia actually wishes to preserve the canvas. Following this revelation, Verso takes matters into his own hands and confronts the last piece of the original Verso's soul, the piece that is keeping the canvas alive. Alicia intervenes, and then the gamer is offered a choice: side with Verso and destroy the canvas, or side with Alicia and preserve it for a while longer. It is here that we find the ultimate expression of Chiaroscuro. Neither choice is clearly correct. Both have innumerable philosophical and material ramifications, though arguably, Verso's ending makes the most thematic sense, representing the importance of moving on from tragedy. It's not necessarily the most moral choice. Though Alicia and her family will move on, what of the conscious beings that inhabited the canvas? Are their lives not of equal value because they were painted? Why shouldn't they be able to live what is left of their lives, no matter how limited? Though CL had enough of an integrated personality to seemingly accept her fate, the same certainly cannot be said for Lune. The expression that she gives Verso as she starts to disappear is haunting in the most accurate sense of the word. It is a mixture of opposing feelings. Given what we know of Lune, I'm sure she understands Verso's choice and sympathizes, but she almost definitely feels deeply resentful that the entirety of her existence was a product of a family's bad choices, and nothing she could have done would have prevented the misery and tragedy she was born into. One would think that these contrasting feelings would be impossible to convey in the remaining seconds of one's life, and yet, Lune did it with a stare. Yet, choosing Alicia's ending isn't much better. It enables Alicia to live the life she lost in the fire, by regaining a healthy, functioning body and being able to revive everybody that died. Moreover, one could argue that it is symbolically resonant with Gustave's philosophy and the typical JRPG ethic. The mortal will is exalted, the natural order continues to be defied. Nonetheless, the peace found in this ending is both temporary and illusory. Nature will return to its natural course, and let's not forget that it is one that requires Verso's continued misery to sustain itself. Still, is there not an argument to be made, given the unique circumstances, that Lumiere and maybe Alicia deserved this? Even if they are continuing their lives in a fantasy, even if the denizens of Lumiere are all made up and are going to die anyways, are their lives not worth preserving? It is the perfect moral chiaroscuro, one of the most difficult that I have ever encountered in any form of media. Though we all have to make a choice to end this particular story, I believe the message that the game wants to impart is that our lives don't have to reflect the endless grief and tragedy found in Expedition 33. When confronted with the darkness, the answer is not to flee from it like Aline, or to fight it like the Expedition. It's to learn how to coexist with it. Life and death, creation and destruction, light and dark, neither can exist without the other. That's why the game's ending doesn't offer a clearly superior choice, because the truth isn't in the light or the dark, but in the space between them, the place where all meaning is born.